I have done a lot of traveling over my life. Road trips, plane trips, one cruise, trips for fun, trips for business, trips for school, trips to see other family, lots and lots of journeys through my life. And I have various souvenirs from these trips, photos, kitschy stuff, magnets, shot glasses, rocks, shells, etc. I can glance at them and know when I got it and where. And with that, the memories of the trips and who I traveled with come flooding back. On my desk in my office are photos of various journeys as well, not always involving travel. Some are just life journeys. There's the photos from my brother's wedding where I officiated, adding my dear sister-in-law to the family. There's one with them after the ceremony and during the reception where I changed out of minister mode and back into sister mode. And another that is a selfie with my father, one of the last photos I have of him. There's a photo of my partner from our first trip to Coco together. And it always makes me smile because in capturing a beautiful sunset, I also captured his smile during those early heady days in our relationship. I have a photo from my sweet niece's wedding from 4 years ago. The photo is a gift from her that year for Christmas. And she is a beaming bride, and I am a weepy but very happy and proud aunt. Another photo is from an actual journey, a pilgrimage, if you will. It is of my dear adult onset sisterhood from seminary, gathered around a sign at the Brattle bookstore in Boston. It was how we ended our gathering to see one of our own get ordained into the Unitarian Universalist ministry. And finally, my own journey. It's a photo of the colleagues who came to my ordination, who placed their hands on my head to pass on the mantle of ministry. My colleagues who loved me into this ministry, who held my hand and gave me words of encouragement throughout the long process from entering seminary to ordination and even now. I'm sure we all have photos from times in our lives that bring us good memories. There are probably some that don't bring good memories. I don't know about you, but I do have a folder in my computer that is marked "Do Not Open." Why? It's the photos from my last wedding. Happy memories on that day, and yet that marriage is over. I have not yet taken the time to look through them and decide which ones I want to keep, for there are a few in there that hold precious memories. I've discovered that's an important thing as we journey in life. There are things we pick up as we go that at the time make us smile when we see them, and then sadly, times come where those things may not bring us joy anymore. What do we do? Unfortunately, human nature being what it is, we often just stick it into a corner and try to forget about it. And sometimes that works, but it's not always healthy. Sometimes we just toss everything out, which also works, but doesn't always feel great. A fun fact about me that many don't always know. When I was growing up, I went to a lot of different churches. Once I was old enough to make my own decisions, I followed where my friends were and went there. As a small child, I was Presbyterian. As an upper elementary student, I was Methodist. As a middle school student and early high school, I was Nazarene. And then as an older teen and young adult, I was in the Assemblies of God. I left that and church in general in my early 20s. I then fully embraced my pagan side, as well as researched and read about many other religions. This continued until I stumbled upon Unitarian Universalism through attendance at a pagan event. It took a few years until I could attend a service, and then I found home. But I carried with me through all of that long journey bits and pieces I picked up from all those locations. Mostly memories, but also thought patterns and ways of being that I hadn't quite noticed. Much like picking up a close friend's mannerisms or catchphrases, I had picked up bits and baubles that would come out from time to time. Some were good, of course, memories and direct experiences that molded me into who I am today and what I believe. Some, however, were not. Theology that was harmful and patriarchal, experiences that were painful and traumatic. Here's the thing, though. For a long while, I was carrying around all of it, good and bad. And that gets heavy when you're traveling through life. It was like carrying around a suitcase from each part of my journey that had all the dirty clothes and extra papers and half-used toiletries, in addition to the cool souvenirs. And that gets really heavy after a while. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who does this. Maybe it's someone who is no longer in your life who taught you to make a dish in a certain way, or a certain song from an old relationship that still makes you smile. It is possible to hold the multitude of good and bad memories at the same time. There was a saying I heard once years ago that I've used ever since. An author that I loved said that she had a ton of emotional baggage she was trying to work through. Her goal was to not get rid of all of it, for that's almost too easy to just toss everything. Instead, she wanted to unpack that 33-piece luggage set and get it all down to a nice small backpack with maybe just a drama wallet. And therein lies the issue, the unpacking. It's hard. Even if we're just talking about physical luggage after a trip, how many of us have left a suitcase for a day or more before getting the energy to unpack it? I know I have. I can be totally honest and say it took me nearly a year to unpack fully from my first cruise. But to be fair, I also came home with the fun souvenir of a broken foot, and then the pandemic hit and unpacking was not high on my list of things to do. We do it when we move too. I don't know anyone who has gotten every single box unpacked and put away in their new home. And I mean, maybe some people do. And if you're one of them, let's talk, because I surely am not one of those people. I have lived in my current home for 2.5 years and still have boxes that have not been fully unpacked. Why do we do this? I don't know. Maybe it's not wanting to have the time fully end by unpacking. Maybe it's because we've carried things around that we don't actually need anymore, but we don't know how to part with it. Maybe it's just because that box is just too painful to open. But it's important. And no, I'm not still talking about physical suitcases and boxes. I'm talking about the internal stuff. Things we've carried around from place to place, things that are affecting who we are now and how we experience life. Therapists say that one of the hardest things to do is unpack trauma. It has to be done in a safe space and in a safe way. And often things get way messier before they get, when you're in the middle of that kind of unpacking, before the way looks clear. I can attest to this from the patient side. Now, I'm not a therapist, so this is not my specialty, but I'll tell you what is: spiritual baggage. For those of us who are what are called come-outers in Unitarian Universalism, which means we came out of another religious tradition to come into this one, we may have a lot of baggage. Perhaps a lot of it is stuff we don't need. But have we thrown out the whole suitcase without looking at what's tucked inside? There could be great memories or gifts or practices within that we ignore for fear of looking in the bag. As I said earlier, I spent a lot of my coming of age years in the Assemblies of God. And for those who may not know, the AG is an evangelical denomination. I was there during the Brownsville revival that swept through America. It was not uncommon for me to be at church 3, 4, sometimes 5 nights a week: Sunday service, prayer meetings, youth group, etc. I even began my college career at the local Bible college. I wanted to be a youth pastor, and I was for a while. There are parts of that time that I loved and still love. It's hard to describe why to people who don't have that background, at least too hard to try to do in a sermon. But when I left, because I was in an abusive marriage and an abusive church, I boxed it all up and shoved it into the deep corner of my heart. Good, bad, ugly, it all went away. But during my years of seeking after that, I would open up small things, the easy stuff. Well, easy for me. I processed the theology I used to believe and worked through what still mattered. I grieved the loss of doing a job I loved with all of my heart. I tried to find new ways to have the experiences I treasured, ways that fit with my current beliefs. So when I came to Unitarian Universalism, I was down to pretty much an emotional backpack full of experiences and a good-sized drama wallet. But something struck me. I saw so many people, good people, who were still carrying around a huge emotional baggage set. In fact, one of my times speaking as a lay leader was about unpacking spiritual baggage. And this was in the days before I had a folder in my computer for sermons, so it's lost to time. But a phrase I remember saying was, "It's time to unpack because you're not on that journey anymore." That's the crux of this. Any spiritual baggage you're carrying around from previous traditions or experiences needs to be unpacked. Not saying throw it all out. There are some good things in there. But carrying around the dirty clothes and maps and brochures for a place you're not traveling to anymore is going to weigh you down. When I attended seminary, I went to a UU identity school, Meadville, Lombard, which put me in kind of a bubble while I was there. Not unlike my time in Bible college, actually. In this bubble, we all spoke the same way. We all knew the cool acronyms and all the different ways to spell words with 2 U's to make it catchy. And while it was easy to tell who had experiences outside of Unitarian Universalism, for the most part, our focus was on traditional Unitarian Universalism with a heavy social justice push and a tip towards the non-theist end of the spectrum, more often than not. Not knocking it, but for a small group of us who longed for more spiritual offerings, we didn't always get that. It was nice, though, to be all be similar in that we were Unitarian Universalists. Now, you may have heard me say that I'm now attending a Methodist school to receive my doctor of ministry. Some of us picked up weird pandemic hobbies. Anyway, this semester was the first time I was able to be in person for intensives. And it was in August that I realized a few things that could not be observed as easily in the virtual setting. This school is not just a progressive Methodist seminary, something I had checked into before applying. No, there is also a large contingent of African Methodist Episcopal ministers studying for their doctor of ministry degrees too. So when we had chapel every morning, we did not have the kind of chapel I was used to experiencing in my little UU bubble of Meadville. No, we had church. It was a full-on experience of the jubilation of a historically Black church worship. It was amazing. And our focus group was tasked with praying over the space on Tuesday morning, something I used to do on the regular in the Assemblies of God. I understood this task deep in my soul. Now, my brain itched a little bit at first, knowing it had been a really long time, and that my current prayers to God or the universe usually start along the lines of what in the actual blank is happening right now. But when I held the beautiful wooden cross that was given to me the day before by one of my mentors, and I began walking, it all came back to me. I don't know if I'd call what I was doing prayer in the traditional sense. After all, I had to put my UU spin on it. But I know that as I walked around that room, thinking of the people who would be in those seats in the next half hour, wishing for them to be open to hear the message of racial reconciliation we were focusing on that week, hoping everyone would stay safe as we navigated school and church in the middle of a pandemic, as I sent loving kindness to their individual ministries. Nothing really changed in the room. Maybe it did, I don't know, but something changed in me. I slipped back into embodied worship and prayer like it was an old favorite sweater found in the back of the closet. And when I got home, I wondered if I would have had that same experience if I hadn't already unpacked my own spiritual baggage years ago. I don't think I would have been. I think if I was still carrying all that baggage with me everywhere I went, I would have gotten something out of the sermons, but I don't think the experience would have been the same. My friends, it's time to look at our baggage. Maybe it's not around church or spirituality. Maybe it's other things you're still carrying around that are causing you pain or fatigue. And I don't mean those in the physical sense either. I encourage you to take time and really look. Don't just toss the whole thing out, because you never know what amazing gifts and memories are still tucked into the pockets and corners. Ask for help if you need it. But let's start lightening our loads as we travel on this journey called life. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so.